of this deal that Australia and Japan are looking to fully ratify. How significant is it to the geostrategic ambitions of both countries within the Indo-Pacific?
Well, it's a very important step. Morrison's visit is not only very important symbolically. This is obviously a very substantial agreement. It's important to remember that this isn't a mutual defence pact. I mean, the countries aren't signing up to defend each other as yet. This is a Reciprocal Access Agreement, which allows for a legal framework for them to be in each other's territory. So it governs things like access to the country, taxation, and jurisdiction of Japanese courts. Having said that, though, it's a base on which to build a more sustained defence relationship. So yeah, it is a very substantial agreement, and it will be a kind of cornerstone on the agreement going forward, as Japan and Australia, which are really the two countries in the region who have been the cheerleaders for the rules-based international order, challenge Chinese positions in the South China Sea and elsewhere.
And I wanted to ask you as well, we have seen obviously the installation now of the new Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. Do you think that he's going to maintain that almost Nippon Keigi methodology when it does come to the Indo-Pacific, the focus on national security, the focus on remilitarizing Japan after such a long period where they had that pacifist, or still do have that pacifist element to their constitution? Do you think that this is his strategic path moving forward to follow on from what Prime Minister Abe had started?
Yeah, I wouldn't call this a particularly militaristic position from Japan, or a Nippon Kaigi, the kind of conservative wing of the LDP and other parties in Japan. I wouldn't say that they're pushing this. These are sensible steps to deal with the rise of China and, importantly, the decline of American power in the region. Japan and Australia are going to need to work together more frequently and more intensely to deal with those two factors that they have to deal with in the Indo-Pacific. This is a sensible strategy. It's certainly not, I would say, an ultra-conservative strategy or anything like that.
Bryce, this is Martin. Let me quickly jump into the question. If we could move the conversation beyond just security and military ties as well, and talk about, I guess, supply chain and resource ties. Because, I mean, what I find interesting is Japan runs on basically natural gas. A lot of that comes from Australia. A lot of Australian resources go into China, obviously, and into South Korea as well. All three of these countries, though, with regards to Japan, net zero emissions, carbon emissions by 2050. Korea made the same promise. China followed with net zero emissions, committing to that by 2060. Australia is going to have to manage these very urgent challenges as well. I mean, 10 years is going to fly by in the blink of an eye.
Yes, indeed it is, and you can rest assured that Suga is no doubt prodding his new friend ScoMo, as he calls him now apparently, to take up the challenge of a 2050 zero carbon deadline. But I think you'll find that ScoMo will not, Scott Morrison rather, will not issue any clear deadlines. There'll be no promise on the part of Australia, because the resource sector is too important to Australia to do.
Indeed. And now we could pivot back to, and the pun is intended, pivot back to security and military ties. I mean, how similar is this going to be to the Obama pivot, which started with 2,000 Marines in Darwin and really didn't get very far past that? I mean, we had more literal combat ship missions, etc. But for Australia and Japan, practically speaking, what is this going to mean?
Yeah, well, as I intimated before, I mean, this is the kind of, not culmination, but another step in a relationship that has been developing fairly intensely off and on since the early 2000s. I mean, the Reciprocal Access Agreement has been in place, or the negotiations have been in place for the past 6 years or so, and there are sticking points around different approaches to incarceration and the death penalty, for example, that were sticking points in the agreement. But this is a really significant step, not only for Australia, but bringing other powers in the region. Let's forget about the United States for a moment. The United States has its own status of forces agreement with Japan that allows US troops on Japanese soil. What the Reciprocal Access Agreement is likely to do, this is a unique agreement because it allows for Japanese forces in Australia as well, but what it allows is for other countries with interests in the region who are not necessarily based in the region, like the UK, Canada, France, to take a look at this agreement as a template and to see what the sticking points may be, see how far they can go in negotiations with the Japanese.
Bryce, if the subtext here is containing China, how do you think Beijing is going to respond at a time when Sino-Australian commercial relations are already very tense, to say the least?
Well, yes, well, exactly. I mean, China will respond how China is expected to respond, which is that it'll see this agreement as a challenge to its ability to continue to forward its presence in places like the South China Sea. It will react very angrily. But the question is, should we really listen to China when it does so? I mean, China has already threatened effectively trade sanctions against Australian barley, Australian wine, and other products. We know that China is displeased with Australia at the moment. The question is, ought we really, I mean, this is a fairly mundane defense agreement between two very natural partners in the Indo-Pacific. Should we really be listening to China when it so obliquely lends its voice to objections?
Understood. So not overtly hostile or hawkish on the face of it. Bryce, pardon me, we'll leave it there, sir. Thank you very much indeed for those comments. Bryce Wakefield there from the Australian Institute of International Affairs. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us.